Welcome to episode 1 of the Settlage Strength podcast, where it is our job to bring you the best tools, tactics, and methods to help you feel and perform your best so you can lift heavy and roll hard. My name is Josh Settlage, and today we're going to be going over how do you balance lifting heavy in the gym and rolling hard on the mat. Now, before we dive into increasing your work capacity, how to optimize your nutrition, pre-workout, pre-jiu-jitsu, post-workout, post-jiu-jitsu, and also talk about things you can do to your sleep to boost your recovery, I want to give you a little bit of an origin story of my own lift heavy, roll hard journey. So hopefully you can avoid making the same mistakes that I've made over the years, because Lord knows I've made a ton of mistakes. So all that being said, I started grappling training in middle school. I did a little bit of grappling when I was doing some other martial arts prior to middle school, but I wouldn't say I wasn't consistently doing grappling training until I started wrestling in 8th grade. Now, also around that time, or I guess you could say maybe 7th grade was when I started working out. I started working out because there was this guy at our church. He was a couple years older than me. He was the coolest guy ever. And I remember I overheard my dad talking to this other guy's dad. And this other dad was saying oh yeah, Logan's been doing push-ups and sit-ups in his room every day. And I was like, that's dope. If push-ups and sit-ups are what Logan's doing, I'm going to start doing that. So I started doing push-ups and sit-ups, and then that kind of progressed until I got my dad's old weight set. So I had push-ups, pull-ups, a couple light dumbbells, and I would just do curls and tricep dumbbell French press. That's all I did. Not the greatest training program, but it was definitely a start. When I started wrestling, I saw some benefit of being a little bit stronger, being a little bit more muscularly developed compared to some of my training partners and some of the people I was competing against. But I still didn't have a good training plan as far as what I was doing with the workouts that I was doing to lift heavy. But I did have a plan with how I was rolling hard, since I was part of a structured wrestling program. Also in 8th grade, some of you old heads might remember this. When I was in 8th grade, I started getting all these ads online for P90X. P90X is still to this day, probably the most successful online training program ever. The P90X ads were so dope and they were so sick. And it was you ordered it online, but you did the workouts in your home. They sent you this box DVD set. So you had all these different discs with all these different workouts that you would follow. It came with booklets for your nutrition plan, your recovery plan, and all that stuff. It was dope. And so I remember in 8th grade, I think for Christmas, I got a pull-up bar. And then, so Christmas is in December, my birthday's in April. Between Christmas and December and then my birthday in April, I was really looking into this P90X stuff. And I remember telling my parents, okay, for my birthday, I want to get P90X. So I used some of my birthday money and saved up some of my allowance and money from raking leaves and stuff like that to go get P90X. And P90X, brand new off beachbody.com, is still kind of pricey. So I remember I found this guy on Craigslist that was selling P90X. He had bought it. He had all the DVDs and stuff, but he didn't open it. Or maybe he did open it. I don't know. It was pretty much brand new, but marked down since he was selling it on Craigslist. And I remember for my birthday, my mom took me to some Winco, somewhere out in 30 minutes or 45 minutes away from our house to meet some guy in the parking lot to cop some P90X. And that day changed my life. I was so hooked on P90X. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with how the program was structured, it was 6 training sessions a week. And it had a lot of good stuff. It had a typical bro split, but they also put some plyometrics in there, also put some conditioning in there, a little bit of some flexibility and yoga. But some of the best workouts, man, were the classic chest and back workout, which was just a bunch of different push-up and pull-up variations. Another fun workout was chest, shoulders, triceps. I freaking loved that one. Shoulders and arms was really fun. They, of course, did lower body stuff, but those weren't my favorite. Just all the upper body ones were my favorite. But I would say what really helped from P90X was that it was a structured training program. And for those of you who want to get better at being able to lift heavy and roll hard, you do need to have some sort of structured training program or some sort of structured training approach. I see a lot of grappling athletes drop the ball and run into some issues with recovery, just a bunch of nagging injuries and all that stuff when they don't follow a training plan. When they just do all of their training by feel, I don't think you get the best results just going off of feel if you're a beginner. Maybe if you're an advanced athlete and you've followed training programs before, you understand a lot of the principles that are being used in these different training programs. Maybe taking your training in the gym by feel can be effective, but at the end of the day, it's important to have a plan. It's important to have a program or some sort of direction with your training. And I saw fantastic results when I started following a set training program such as P90X. Now, the other thing that was great about P90X was that there was a huge emphasis on body weight strength and improving strength to body weight ratio. There was a ton of different push-ups, pull-ups, all sorts of calisthenic movements. And I think as a grappling athlete, if you really want to develop some brutal grappling strength, I believe it starts with improving your strength to body weight ratio. And you can do that by starting with calisthenics. So doing different types of pull-ups, push-ups, dips. And that program, it didn't require parallel bars or rings. So you didn't do dips, but if you have access to rings or have access to parallel bars, dips can be a great calisthenic exercise. And so I did P90X for a long time. I did it basically from like 8th grade, right at the end of wrestling season in 8th grade, all the way through freshman year of wrestling season. But when I got into high school and was wrestling in high school, one of our coaches, he was our wrestling coach, and then he was also a CrossFit coach. He was also a cop too. He was like an all-around badass. This guy was cool. And he got us hooked on CrossFit. And so some of the strength and conditioning workouts that we were doing with him were very CrossFit based, like 21-15-9, tons of burpees, tons of box jumps and kettlebell swings and all that stuff. And that like really lit a fire under me. I absolutely loved it. I got so hooked on CrossFit. I drank the CrossFit Kool-Aid. You could ask anyone that knew me back then. All I cared about was CrossFit. I was trying to be the next Rich Froning. Obviously, I'm not the next Rich Froning. I never got even close, but I just really loved CrossFit. And if the biggest benefit that I got from P90X was following a structured training program, the biggest benefit that I got from CrossFit was learning more about how training, the stuff that you do in the gym, has a direct impact on your athleticism on the mat. Now, I don't like it when people get too hopped up on like, oh, this is a functional movement. This is not a functional movement. I don't think there are any functional or unfunctional movements. I just think exercises are either appropriate or inappropriate based on your own training goals and based on your own training needs. So back in the day, a lot of CrossFit people were really dogging on bicep curls. And I used to make fun of bicep curls too. I did a whole bunch of bicep curls in middle school. I got into high school, started doing CrossFit, and I was like, bicep curls are freaking lame. And I think that was a mistake. So to use that as an example, some people may say that bicep curls are not functional because it doesn't look like a squat or it doesn't perfectly mimic the same actions your body would go through when you're sprinting. However, when you are trying to squeeze someone's head off at Jiu-Jitsu, having bicep strength and elbow flexion is really important sometimes. And what better way to train elbow flexion strength than doing a bicep curl? So all that being said, if P90X got me started on following a training program that really helped enhance my grappling athleticism, CrossFit, in a way, helped me better understand how getting stronger in different movement patterns like the squat, lunges, hip hinging movements like deadlifts or good mornings, vertical pulling like pull-ups, horizontal pulling like rows, horizontal pressing like push-ups, bench press, floor press, stuff like that, and vertical pressing, overhead press, even different things, even different rotational exercises like med ball throws, med ball slams. That really kind of laid a good foundation of me building capacity, just strength, conditioning, even speed and explosive power in these different movement patterns that can help just my overall, movement, not just movement quality, but athletic capacity in the things that I do on the mat. So I did CrossFit for a while. Now, if there was a mistake that I made with CrossFit, it was that the intensity and the volume was so ridiculously high, I did not pay attention to my recovery at all. Like all I cared about was training hard, but I didn't focus at all on recovering harder. And that was a huge problem because it's not about what you do in the gym or on the mat that leads to progress. It's about what you do and can still recover from. So if you're going to the gym 6 days a week doing these 90-minute CrossFit workouts, what energy do you have left to actually get in a good wrestling or jiu-jitsu practice? Probably not very much. You can like force yourself to go to wrestling, force yourself to go to jiu-jitsu, but the total quality and output that you can apply to that training session is going to be severely limited because you're so fatigued from all the stuff that you're doing in the gym. This is another mistake that I see a lot of grapplers make where they say like, hey, Coach Jay, I'm not really making progress. I'm always banged up. I'm always injured. I have stubborn body fat that I'm trying to lose. I feel super weak. I'm always getting overpowered and out-muscled by all these other grapplers. When I ask them about their recovery, I'd say like 80% of the time, they're like, oh, my recovery's okay. It's like, well, tell me, how much are you sleeping? I don't really track my sleep. Really? Okay. Like, do you have structured rest days? It's like, I don't take any days off. I'm always training. It's like, all right, dog. Well, if you want to start making better progress, if you want to start enhancing your grappling athleticism, if you want to build brutal grappling strength, get freaking jacked, never gas out, all that good stuff, you got to pay attention to your recovery as well. And once you kind of learn that hard lesson, you will definitely see some improvements in your overall athleticism because you're not only training hard, but you're doing the necessary things and taking the necessary steps to recover harder. So that kind of brings me to end of high school. I had done a bunch of CrossFit. I competed in CrossFit. I was wrestling up until my junior year of high school. As I was coming out of high school, I got really into bodybuilding, really into powerlifting. I was into bodybuilding before in middle school, and it's kind of the early part of high school when I was still doing P90X. I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. I loved Ronnie Coleman. Loved watching those old school Jay Cutler YouTube videos. The videos where there's a Jay Cutler video where he's just so ridiculously jacked out of his mind, and they do a slow motion of him running and jumping in the pool, and the way he looks when he like tucks his knees to his chest to do a cannonball, just like that's the biggest dude I've ever seen in my life. So I was still really into bodybuilding, still kind of coming out of CrossFit because unfortunately I'd caught a bunch of injuries from poor recovery habits and poor training habits that made doing some of the CrossFit movements and doing some of the CrossFit workouts kind of tough. So I just went more into bodybuilding and powerlifting. And I was so small in high school. I weighed 143 pounds when I graduated high school. And I was like, I'm tired of being this small. So I just went on this crazy bulk and tried to get as big as possible. And I went on the seafood diet. So like if I saw food anywhere, like I was grubbing down, I was eating it. And I gained 33 pounds, went from 143 to 176. And I was all dimple bellied out. Like I was fat for the pretty much, or just was carrying way more body fat than what was healthy for like a bulk, so to speak. And so after that point, like I definitely got stronger, definitely like all my lifts went up, which was cool. I was getting better at the squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, stuff like that. But I didn't feel very athletic, and I wasn't even wrestling or doing jiu-jitsu at that point. I had already stopped wrestling my junior year of high school. So graduate high school, I'm in college, I put on all this weight, and I decided like, man, I really got to lean out. And so I was kind of leaning out, kind of dieting, but I really wasn't making that much progress. And I finally just decided like, man, I really need something to push me beyond what is comfortable and to really hold myself accountable to getting shredded. So I signed up for a bodybuilding show, which I almost quit. I was so close to quitting this bodybuilding show. And maybe that's a story for a different episode where I'll talk about that entire experience. But training for the bodybuilding show was awesome. It was awesome. It was hard, but like the lessons I learned during that point were so amazing. And this was before I started jiu-jitsu. So by the time I started jiu-jitsu, I already had a lot of bodybuilding experience. And so if you're kind of keeping track with the story, you can see all these different lessons that I'm learning. The importance of following a structured training program from doing P90X. The importance of the lesson I learned from CrossFit was the importance of looking at how improving my ability to do certain movements or build capacity in these different movement patterns contribute to me being a better athlete on the mat. In bodybuilding, it really taught me how to mentally engage with training, how to mentally focus on moving my body in a very specific and detailed way. So, what does it mean when you're doing a row to really feel it in your lats and in your back versus in your bicep? When I was doing CrossFit, I never thought about that stuff. It did not matter what muscles I felt being used, what the movement was like, whether I had a strong mind muscle connection, didn't matter as long as the movement went from A to B, or as long as the weight went from A to B, whatever the case was. In bodybuilding, that kind of flipped it on its head, where the movement mattered a lot less and it was a lot more about feel. Now, I think bodybuilding is such a powerful training tool for grapplers, because when you think about learning the different skills that you're going to be using on the mat, you do need to have as much conscious control over your body as possible. You need to know what it feels like when you have a guillotine locked in. You need to know what it feels like to crunch down on one side and, not just pull up with your bicep. Like there's things that there's like small details in the different techniques that you use on the mat that if you don't have a good sense of awareness or a good sense of mind muscle connection, that can be kind of tough when you're learning those techniques. Now, that's not to say that every grappling athlete should try to look like Jay Cutler or Ronnie Coleman or C-Bum, but I am saying that the practice of bodybuilding, or the intention that you take into these bodybuilding workouts, where you're really working on the mind muscle connection, you're really working on contracting very specific muscles as hard as possible, that has a lot of benefit to your overall athletic development as a grappling athlete. Now, the other thing I would say that was really powerful and beneficial about bodybuilding was you really learn how to manage fatigue well and deal with the buildup of lactate. A huge part of bodybuilding is chasing the biggest pump possible and being able to manage that pump and continue to get good quality reps while you're super pumped up. And if you've ever done jiu-jitsu or you've ever wrestled, there are definitely moments where you get really pumped up and you can't just like shake your arms out and like come back to the match later or come back to the training round later. You have to get really good at managing that buildup of lactate and improving your own lactate buffering capacity. And I think that bodybuilding can be a tool to help you better handle those sensations of local muscular fatigue that you'll also experience while you're grappling. So that's what I learned from bodybuilding. After bodybuilding, while I was bodybuilding, I was in college. I definitely did not feel like doing another bodybuilding show. And that's when I got into jiu-jitsu. And so while along the same time I was getting into jiu-jitsu, probably a year later, I started my internship at Super Training Gym, which was owned by Mark Bell. Super Training Gym, strongest gym in the West. This was awesome powerlifting gym. Like some of the strongest guys I've ever seen in my entire life came out of that gym. It was a very regular thing at the time that I was training there on a Saturday to have people come in that were squatting 600, 700, 800 pounds. People coming in benching 400, 500 pounds on the regular, deadlifting 600, 700, 750 pounds. It was so ridiculous. Like the people there were crazy strong. And so I was really into powerlifting when I was training there. And the biggest lesson I learned from Super Training Gym, or one of the biggest lessons as it pertains to developing grappling athleticism, was really learning all these different ways to just get brutally strong, using big compound exercises to just get ridiculously strong. And that kind of brings me to where I am today. I've learned a lot of other things since then, but now when I look at how to balance lifting heavy and rolling hard, and when I'm coaching grapplers and helping them balance lifting heavy and rolling hard, a lot of it comes down to those things. Like, hey, let's follow a training program. If you're going into the gym without a plan, you're planning to fail. You got to have some sort of plan that takes into account your overall training goals, the specific athletic adaptations you want your body to make, whether you want to become stronger, faster, more explosive, more flexible, whatever the case may be. You also got to make sure that you're bringing the right mental focus and intent into all of those training sessions, working on that mind-muscle connection, getting in tune with your body so that way you can get the most out of every single training session, and really like using different modalities and different methods to get brutally strong. And you can also look at, like, there's also other things that you can do. It's not all about getting strong, even though getting stronger is the number one thing you can do off the mat to improve your performance on the mat. But it's about getting stronger. It's about building muscle. It's about improving your conditioning so you never gas out. And so, all that being said, those are some of the most powerful lessons I learned over the years in a very brief history of my lift heavy, roll hard journey. So, when it comes to what you can do, or some things that you can think about to improve your ability to lift heavy and roll hard, I would suggest just start by building a foundation of strength, a foundation of general physical preparedness. Now, the great strength coach Louis Simmons, he has often talked about, or did often talk about, RIP, how a pyramid is only as tall as the width of its base. So if you look at a pyramid, a perfect mathematical pyramid, you measure how wide the base is, and then you measure how tall the pyramid is. Those two numbers should be equal. What that means is, as you expand upon the base of that pyramid, that means that the height of that pyramid should also increase. Now, how that pertains to athletic development for grappling is the greater your base of strength, the greater your base of general fitness and general physical preparedness, the higher the peak of athleticism and performance that you can achieve. Now, if you want to get really good at being able to lift heavy and roll hard, you got to expand that base first. You can try to just kind of hit your peak, but if you have a really low peak, it's not going to go well for you. So when I start working with a new grappling athlete, or maybe they're a very experienced grappler, but they're new to working with me, one of the first things I do is focus on building that base of strength, focus on building that base of physical preparedness. So basic strength training, things, movements that are the essential movements that our body goes through. So getting stronger in squatting movements, lunging movements, not just going forwards and backwards, but also lunging side to side, hip hinging movements, or movements where they're doing like a deadlift or a good morning, picking something up off the ground, rotational movements and resisting rotation. Also looking at things like pushing movements, pushing forwards, pushing overhead, or you can also say pressing horizontally or pressing vertically, as well as pulling movements, pulling horizontally and pulling vertically. Building strength and all of those movements is a great place to start, to building a strong foundation that you can use to kind of build out that base of that pyramid. Now, the other thing that we focus on is really making sure that we're improving mobility and improving your ability to move in and out of these different positions. We want to try to build strength through the largest range of motion possible. So the goal would ultimately be to get really strong and doing deep ass to grass squats. If you can't do an ass to grass squat right away, that's fine, but let's work on that. Let's continue to improve your mobility to sit deep in the bottom of a squat and be comfortable in that position. When you're doing things like dumbbell bench press, the goal should be to really try to get those dumbbells down to hit your chest, and maybe even a little bit below your chest, where you get a good healthy stretch at that bottom position. When you're doing pull-ups or rowing exercises, you want to pull yourself all the way over the bar, get that chin over the bar. You want to try to row, get your elbows behind your body as much as you can. Working through a full range of motion is a great way to not only build brutal grappling strength, but also drastically decrease your overall risk of injury. Now, when it comes to improving your base of general physical preparedness with conditioning, there are a couple things that you can do, but really the biggest thing, just the best way to improve your conditioning for grappling is to just grapple, to roll hard. That's how you do it. Like, yes, you can run. Yes, you can do fan bike sprints. Yes, you can do Tabatas and all that stuff. And I have videos on my Instagram, on my YouTube channel, talking about all those things. Yet, at the end of the day, the number one way to improve your conditioning to roll hard is to roll hard. So, as best as you can, if you're doing jiu-jitsu and you want to build out your base of physical preparedness, don't take rounds off. That doesn't mean you need to go balls to the wall and go absolutely bonkers and treat every single training round like it's the finals of ADCC. But try to stay moving throughout the entire round. Try to not take any rounds off. And over time, you'll see that your ability to handle longer durations of grappling or just to handle the volume of training continues to improve. Now, what you can do off the mat to improve your conditioning on the mat, there are a couple things that you can do. You can look into doing more zone 2 runs or some aerobic base training. And I used to be really anti-running for a long period of time, and I've kind of changed my tune over the last 2 years or so when it comes to running. But whether it's running, whether it's using a Concept 2 rower or a fan bike, it doesn't really matter. You can just go for some low to moderate intensity, slow duration cardiovascular exercise, we'll call it that, for maybe like starting out with 20 to 25 minutes and then gradually progressing that to like 45 to 60 minutes. And this isn't hard. You shouldn't be like gasping for air or dying at the end of these zone 2 conditioning workouts. It's just like, it's a pace that I would say, if you're looking at it on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a pace that's like 5 to 6 for the most part. Maybe towards the end, because you're getting a little fatigued, it kind of creeps up to about a 7 out of 10 difficulty. But throughout the entire time, you should just be able to maintain a conversation or maintain nasal breathing the entire time. That could be a great way to gradually build out that base of aerobic conditioning, which contributes to that pyramid that we talk about, building out the base of the pyramid so you can achieve a higher athletic potential or higher athletic peak. There's other things that you can do. You can do more traditional GPP or general physical preparedness work to kind of build out that base. Things like sled drags. One of my favorite, sled drags are awesome, but another one of my favorites that you can do if you don't have access to a sled is long bouts of walking lunges. If you want to build a crazy, crazy, robust and strong lower body, you want to, I don't like it when people use the term bulletproof for things like your knees and your ankles, but if you want to build really robust and durable knees, ankles, hips, low back, all that stuff, long bouts of walking lunges, I personally have found, and a lot of the athletes I coach have found that to be very, very, very effective. You could start by just setting a timer for about 10 minutes and just doing as many walking lunges as you can in that 10 minutes. Gradually progress that up to about 15 minutes over the course of a couple weeks. And then if you can do 15 minutes of walking lunges straight, maybe find access to a track and see how fast you can do 400 meters or 800 meters of walking lunges. This is something that I originally picked up from Corey Gregory. Corey Gregory, I hope to have him on the podcast someday because I owe a lot of my training philosophy and just career path in life to that guy. Like, I've been inspired big time by the stuff that Corey Gregory has done. All that being said, Corey Gregory, with his bodybuilding training, he wasn't a big fan of traditional cardio where you're just doing the step mill for hours every single day or walking on the treadmill. He wanted something that had a little bit better of a carryover to him staying strong. And he found that doing walking lunges was a great way to do that. So when I was doing my bodybuilding show, I did a ton of walking lunges. And even once I stopped bodybuilding and was doing jiu-jitsu, I still maintained doing walking lunges all the time, and I still have a lot of my athletes do it. And if you're listening to this and you feel a little overwhelmed by all this information, you're like, man, like I hear what you're saying, like I got to get strong in these movement patterns, I got to do this conditioning stuff, I got to build out this base of athleticism, and you need help getting started with that, I created a free training program that you can download, which is going to help you do exactly that. It's called Grappler Accelerator. It's a 30-day training program that's going to help you kickstart your grappling athleticism. And I put everything I possibly could in there. It comes with a full training program designed to help you increase your strength, stimulate muscle growth, and improve your conditioning. It has a simple and clean diet guide. It comes with entire recovery protocols, mobility work that you can do, as well as a super sleep toolkit, which we are going to talk about sleep a little bit later in this episode. But if you want to get started on being able to enhance your overall grappling athleticism, so ultimately you can feel and perform your best, check out Grappler Accelerator. Like I said, it's 100% free. I believe there's over 900 people using that training program right now. You can just click the link in below to get started. That's all within the Strength Matrix training app. If that's something you're interested in, click the link below, and it should be a good time. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about nutrition, because training is important when it comes to lifting heavy and rolling hard. However, nutrition is kind of like the sleeper, I'd say. Even though nutrition is important and a lot of people talk about how important nutrition is, I still think it is severely underrated when it comes to lifting heavy and rolling hard in the same day. Now, there's a couple of different things that we're going to talk about. You have your pre workout and pre jiu-jitsu nutrition, you have your intra workout nutrition. You can have intra jiu-jitsu nutrition, but I mean, I'll briefly touch on that because most people aren't eating anything or really drinking anything at jiu-jitsu besides just water, because you don't really want to have a full stomach if someone goes knee on belly on you, because that's not gonna that's not gonna end well. And then you have your post-training or post-jiu-jitsu nutrition. Now, when it comes to nutrition, and this is something that I talk about in the Simple and Clean Diet Guide that's in the Grappler Accelerator program, I I'm not here to demonize any sort of specific food. Like, I'm not going to say like, oh, processed food is awful, you should avoid seed oils and all this stuff. I will say this though. If you get most of your nutrients from, or most of your or if most of your calories are comprised of nutrient dense whole food sources, you will perform better. You will make faster progress. You will recover faster than if most of your calories were comprised of nutrient deficient, overly processed foods. Now, if you want a very simple and clean diet guide that you can follow, check out the Grappler Accelerator Training Program. There are 3 nutritional principles that I talk about in that guide. The first one being eat what has a mom or comes from the ground. If you just stick with that first one, like that, you're already off to a fantastic start. The second principle is to consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. This is really important because a lot of grappling athletes think that they're consuming enough protein, but when I start working with them and I say, okay, I want you to track your protein intake, and they're like, I've never tracked it before. And I say like, okay, this is how you do it. You like look at the, nutrition label, you got to get a food scale and all this stuff. Then when they start tracking, almost like 9 times out of 10, they're shocked at how little protein they're actually consuming. Now, of course, there are some people out there that say, oh, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, that's too much. You really only need 0.8 or 0.7. I don't care. I have found that it is so much easier just to like, hey, I weigh this much. I need this many grams of protein. I don't even have to do any math. If I can avoid doing math, I'm in favor of it. And so, yeah, is it maybe a little bit too much protein? Maybe. Can you probably do 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight and be fine? Probably, maybe, but for me, it's just so simple and so much easier just to aim 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Protein can also help with satiety and decreasing the overall feelings of hunger. So if you are dieting or are trying to lose body fat, actually having a little bit more protein can be beneficial and just kind of holding off some of the hunger that you feel, just because it takes longer to digest, is more satiating and all that stuff. But the biggest reason why I believe 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is so important is because protein has a direct impact on your body's ability to recover from all the training that you're doing. You really got to make sure that when you're training, whether you're lifting heavy in the gym or rolling hard on the mat, you're providing your body not just with the calories and the fuel that's needed for those training sessions, but also the nutrients that are required for the recovery afterwards. So if you stick to eating what has a mom or comes from the ground and consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you're already off to a fantastic start in providing your body with great fuel for the training sessions and providing it with the nutrients required for recovery. Now, the third piece of the Simple and Clean Diet Guide from the Grappler Accelerator program is if it comes in a box, bag, or can and has more than 3 ingredients, you should probably try to find something else to eat. Now, again, that's not to say I'm here to demonize processed foods or anything like that. I'm just saying if you really want to maximize your athletic potential, consuming the majority of your calories from foods that are nutrient dense and are from whole food sources usually is going to lead to much better outcomes than if you have nutrient deficient, overly processed foods. That's all I'll say on that. When it comes to how much you should eat. It really depends on your overall activity level, on your overall training goals. Maybe in a future episode, I'll talk about different measurements or equations that you can use to find out how many calories you should be consuming each day. If you've never tracked your calories before, I don't even think it's that important to track your calories at first. I think what's most important, and this is something that I've used for years, not just for myself, but anytime I'm working with an athlete that's new to dieting or new to eating for performance, I would much rather have that new athlete focus on food quality rather than overall food quantity. I would much rather them build the habit of eating nutrient dense whole food sources first. Then, after a couple weeks, maybe even a couple months, we can start diving into the weeds on okay, how many calories do you need to hit to reach this target goal? How many calories do you need to be consuming to reach this fat loss goal or to reach this muscle gain goal? So, I'll address that in a future episode. What I want to talk about next is your pre workout or pre jiu-jitsu nutrition. It's important that you're properly fueling your body to have the best training session possible. When we think about training sessions, these training sessions are each training session is a stimulus. It's a stimulus to your body to make different adaptations. So if you go to the gym and you lift, really, really heavy for sets of 3 to 5 reps, that is a stimulus to get stronger. If you go to the gym and you lift, moderately heavy for sets of 10 to 15, that is a stimulus to build more muscle. If you go to the gym and you jump on the fan bike and you do sprints for 30 seconds, that is a stimulus to improve in your overall conditioning. And so we want to make sure that our bodies are prepared to get the greatest stimulus possible from each training session. If we go into the training session compromised, that means that we're not going to get the best training stimulus, which means that we're not going to really get the best overall adaptation. So when people talk about, oh, should I train fasted? Should I train with some food in me, or should I have a snack before I go train? In my personal opinion, I have found that in most cases for athletes that want to lift heavy and roll hard, it's much better to have at least some sort of fuel in your system before you go train. So even if you're training early in the morning, I believe it's important to have at least a little bit of something to give you a little extra boost and a little extra fuel for that morning training session. You can do that either by having a very large meal the night before or, getting up a little bit earlier, having a very small snack beforehand. Now, when it comes to the types of nutrients and things that you should focus on before training, whether that's lifting heavy or rolling hard, try to focus on easily digestible carbohydrates, water, and electrolytes. You don't want to focus too much on protein. You don't want to focus too much on fat. Having a little bit of protein pre-workout or pre-jiu-jitsu can be okay, but you don't want to have so much protein that it really slows down your digestion, and you don't want to have so much fat that it also slows down your digestion. Because the last thing that you want is to have a full stomach when someone goes knee on belly or just absolutely crushes you from top position, because that's never fun. So an example of a pre-workout that I'm a huge fan of, this is like the unofficial pre-workout of the Lift Heavy Roll Hard Grappling Club, is 2 tablespoons of honey, 1 double shot of espresso, and 100 milliliters of milk. The milk has a little bit of fat in there, so I try not to have too much more than just 100 milliliters, but for me, I found that that's like one of my all-time favorite pre-workouts, espresso, and I put it in that little glass, and I have my steamed milk in there. You guys know I'm an espresso nerd. And then separately, I have 2 tablespoons of honey. Honey is incredibly fast digesting. It's pure carbohydrates for the most part, I believe. In 2 tablespoons, there's 34 grams of carbs. And then also with that, I have like a glass of water, and I've just put one of those dissolvable electrolyte tablets in there. So pre-training or pre-workout, I have easily digestible carbohydrates, a little bit of caffeine from the espresso, a little bit of carbohydrates from the milk, and a little bit of fat in there too, but thankfully not too much. And then I have my water, have my electrolytes. That is like one of my all-time favorite pre-workout meals. Now, if I were going to jiu-jitsu, I'd pretty much have the exact same thing. Some sort of easily digestible carbohydrate, some sort of easily easily digestible carbs, electrolytes, water. The only thing that would make it different is that if I'm training in the evening or within 12 hours of bedtime, I don't want to have any more caffeine. And that kind of goes into what we'll talk about with sleep a little bit later on. But pre-workout, all you need to know is that if you want to go freaking crush your workout, easily digestible carbohydrates, some form of electrolytes, and water. Now, post workout, if you're lifting heavy and rolling hard in the same day, you could almost think of your post workout as part of your pre-jiu-jitsu meal. And this meal, your post workout or pre jiu-jitsu meal, is arguably the most important meal of the day, because in this meal you want to get in as many good quality nutrients as possible to further help kickstart that recovery process, while also properly refueling your body for that rolling hard session later in the day. So post workout, you kind of repeat what you did with a pre-workout meal. Easily digestible carbohydrates, water, electrolytes. The other thing that's important to add for your post-workout meal is easily digestible protein. Now, when it comes to the fat content for your post-workout meal, it kind of depends on how far out your jiu-jitsu session is. So today, the day I'm recording, I trained this morning. I went for a run and I had my espresso, my honey, electrolytes, all that stuff before my run. But because I don't have jiu-jitsu for like another 6 hours, it's okay if I have a little bit more fat in my post-workout meal, because I got 6 hours to digest it all. It's going to be totally fine. However, on some other training days, sometimes I go to the gym and then only like 2 or 3 hours later, I'm going to jiu-jitsu. And in those instances, I do try to make sure that my fat intake is a lot lower, so it doesn't continue, so I don't continue to digest the meal while I'm also training hard at jiu-jitsu. So just keep that in mind. One thing I forgot to mention is intro workout. Now, intro workout is not necessary for everybody. I would say intro workout nutrition can be beneficial for people who are lifting heavy and rolling hard in the same day, because it gives you a little bit of a head start on the recovery and refueling process during your workout. Or it can be beneficial for people who are doing workouts that are taking like 75 to 90 minutes in length, which for the most part, if you're training that long in the gym and your main goal is jiu-jitsu, you are probably messing around too much at the gym. Like after the 75-minute mark, it's really hard to continue getting a good quality workout and like put your best effort forward with all the exercises that you're doing. So all that to say, if you're training in the gym and you're going to be lifting heavy and rolling hard, and jiu-jitsu is like your main thing, like jiu-jitsu is your number one priority, try to keep your training sessions less than 75 minutes, like 60, 75 minutes tops. And if that's the case, if they're all within that 60 to 75-minute range and you had a pre-workout snack or pre-workout meal, you probably don't even need an intro workout shake or an intro workout meal. However, even if you're doing a 60 to 75-minute workout, if you're going to jiu-jitsu later in the day, it would be beneficial, in my opinion, to maybe consider some intro workout nutrition. And really what you would want to include in your intro workout nutrition is fast digesting carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of fast digesting protein, and some water and electrolytes. So for myself, I'll kind of go through like my full pre, intra, and post-workout food choices, so to speak. So pre-workout, we already talked about 2 tablespoons of honey, double shot of espresso, 100 milliliters of milk, water, and electrolytes. Intro workout, I have 8 ounces of orange juice. I kind of cut that with 8 more ounces of water just to dilute it a little bit. Put in 1 scoop of whey protein, which is about 25 grams of protein. Put in 1 scoop of cyclic dextrin, which is a very, very fast form, or very, very fast digesting form of carbohydrates. Then I usually pop in about 10 grams of creatine. That's my intro workout shake. Then post-workout, I have rice, usually a baked potato, 2 fast digested forms of carbohydrates, usually some eggs, some ground beef, and I salt that bad boy for some electrolytes. Usually have an additional electrolyte tablet, especially in the summertime when it gets crazy, crazy hot. And there is a little bit more fat content in that post-workout meal just from the ground beef and the eggs, but I do use a pretty lean form of ground beef, so there isn't like a ton of fat in there, so to speak. And that's that. That is how I would suggest taken a look at your nutrition when it comes to pre, intra, and post workout. Now, after jujitsu, you'd kind of, if jujitsu is your last training session of the day, you'd kind of want to just keep following that format. Easily digestible carbohydrates, fast digesting protein, or faster digesting protein. If it's the very last training session of the day, it's fine. If it's not the fastest form of, or the fastest digesting form of protein, and then you can also have a little bit more fat in that last meal of the day, or the meal following that last training session of the day, because you don't have any more training for the rest of the day. So that's that. The last thing we need to talk about when it comes to balancing lifting heavy and rolling hard is going to be just your overall recovery strategies. Now, there's something that I like to call the recovery trifecta, which includes your sleep, your nutrition, and your overall training schedule. We haven't talked about sleep yet. We have talked a lot about nutrition, so we won't go too much into that. And we haven't even talked about your overall training schedule. So when it comes to your sleep, sleep is the number one thing you can do to improve your recovery. And I used to be a big anti-sleep guy. I was the nastiest hater on sleep. Like, there's old videos and old podcasts of me saying, like, I get up at 2 a.m. I up before the enemy. I'm up before everybody else. Like, if my competitors are getting up at 4 a.m., I'm up 2 hours before them, and blah 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 blah. And there's still part of me that it, like, gets fired up like that and loves to get up early. I still love getting up early, but a goal that I had for myself in 2024 was to get 7 hours of sleep minimum every single night throughout the year. And I'd say, like, I hit that goal at like a 95% accuracy. And in 2024, I saw the greatest improvement in my ability to lift heavy and roll hard. I got stronger than ever. I put on more muscle than ever. I got so ridiculously shredded when I did a fat loss phase. My conditioning was out of this world. I was performing way better on the mat. I felt like an absolute mutant. And I strongly believe that the only change I made to my life was getting more sleep. And there's a lot of things that we can do to try to justify getting less sleep. However, if you want to lift heavy and roll hard, the number one thing you can do to recover from all that is to dial in your sleep. Like I mentioned in the Grappler Accelerator program, which is free, by the way, I do have a super sleep toolkit, which kind of goes over all of my best methods to optimize not only your quality of sleep, but also help improve your overall quantity of sleep. At the very least, try to get at least 7 hours of sleep every single night. I know some of you that are parents, or some of you that are working multiple jobs, some of you that are students, that's going to be really, really tough. Just do the best you can. Now, that may mean that you have to make some sacrifices. That may mean that you have to make some adjustments to your lifestyle to make time for that. And that's what you got to do. You got to do what's necessary. You got to make time for what's important to you. Anytime someone tells me that, oh, I don't have time to do this, oh, I don't have time to do that, I would do this, but man, I just don't have time. It's like, fine. I guess it's not that important to you, and that's okay. If getting 7 hours of sleep is not that important to you and you don't have time, that is fine. Just, like, deal with it. That's just the way it goes. But if you are serious, and what is important, and if what is important to you is being able to fully optimize your athleticism, become brutally strong, pack on slabs of muscle, never gas out in jiu-jitsu, sleep really needs to be a priority, and making it a priority enough to get at least 7 hours can go a long way in helping you recover from all the training that you do in the gym and all the training that you do on the mat. Now, we did already talk a lot about nutrition when it comes to overall recovery, and just to briefly touch on that, you just got to make sure that you're providing your body with enough fuel, not just for the training sessions themselves, but also with the right and proper nutrients to assist in that recovery. We'll probably do some more episodes in the future all about recovery, and if you guys have questions about recovery, nutrition, and supplements and all that stuff, you can drop them in the comments below on YouTube, and I'd be more than happy to maybe turn that into an episode in the future. But the third and final thing that I look at when it comes to optimizing your recovery is your overall training schedule. You can't go hard in the paint every single day and expect to drastically enhance your athleticism because you will accumulate fatigue and you will end up crashing and burning. When I talk to athletes that are big time competitors, not meaning like they're top competitors, but they're very, maybe big time is the wrong description there, consistent and very dedicated competitors. That often means that they're spending a ton of time on the mat and they're training pretty much every single day. That's great if you want to train every single day. I'm not saying you should not train every single day. However, you do need to get very specific and very intentional about how you're going to structure training throughout the week because you can't expect to go hard every single day and survive. Your training, I found, gets the best results and gives you the biggest bang for your buck when you have high stimulus training sessions and you have low stimulus training sessions. And you spread those high stimulus training sessions throughout the week. So that way you could show up to each of those high stimulus sessions. You could almost look at those sessions as like high intensity sessions. You could show up to those high intensity sessions feeling good and get the most out of that training. So for example, say on Monday, you like to go lift in the morning and then you're going to go kick the week off strong, do some hard rounds at Jiu-Jitsu. That's awesome. On Tuesday, you should probably plan on dialing down the intensity a little bit to give yourself a little bit of time or a little bit more room to recover before you have another really, really lift heavy, roll hard day. Now, on Tuesday, you could still go to Jiu-Jitsu. On Tuesday, you can still go to the gym. Just be intentional about dialing it back a little bit. So that way, if you decide to lift heavy and roll hard at a high intensity on Wednesday or Thursday, you have enough juice or you have enough fuel in the tank, you have enough oomph to give in those training sessions. When I talk to grappling athletes and they're asking me questions, okay, like what days should I lift? What days should I go to Jiu-Jitsu? What I typically tell them is do that on whatever days the work is going to get done. Like if you can only go to the gym Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, well, I guess you're going to the gym Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, if you're going to Jiu-Jitsu Monday through Friday, maybe on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you tweak some of your Jiu-Jitsu training a little bit just to allow for a little bit better recovery and allow you to get a little bit more out of those workouts in the gym. And then maybe you also plan on taking like a full recovery day on that Friday. So that way, when you go back to Jiu-Jitsu on Saturday, you're feeling fresh and you're feeling good and ready to kick ass in that training session. So when it comes to your overall training schedule, there are a few things that I have found that work really well for me and the athletes that I coach, and that is the 48 to 72 hour rule. So we try to separate the hardest workouts and the hardest jiu-jitsu training sessions by about 48 to 72 hours. So for myself, I usually try to put my hardest, just most intense, just gnarliest, gutsiest rolling sessions on Tuesday and or Thursday. So I separate those two. I don't want to do those 2 days back to back. Now, I also put some of my hardest workouts about 48 to 72 hours apart. So I go to the gym, not every other day, but do harder workouts almost every other day. I want to have a little bit of space between those hard training sessions. Now, the other thing that you can think of is if you're going to be doing jiu-jitsu and lifting in the same day, you can kind of stack those on a one day and then the next day dial it back a little bit. So what this looks like is if you're going to lift heavy and roll hard in the same day, say that's on Monday, you stack those on the same day. Like, hey, like this is my hard workout, it's my hard jiu-jitsu session. I'm like really, redlining on this training day. Tuesday and or Wednesday, be intentional about focusing more on recovery, bringing down the training volume, bringing down the training intensity a little bit, and then planning on having another big lift heavy roll hard day on Thursday. If you try to lift heavy roll hard on Monday, lift heavy roll hard on Tuesday, by Wednesday, you're going to have accumulated a ton of fatigue. You're going to feel pretty banged up, and it may be really hard to get the most out of that training session on Wednesday. If you can better structure your overall training throughout the week, you can have greater recovery, not just throughout the week, but in consecutive weeks, have better recovery, kind of start each week feeling a little bit more fresh, feeling a little bit more fired up and ready to have another great week of training. If you're also simultaneously taking care of your sleep and your nutrition, you're going to be in a great spot to be able to recover, not just train hard, but also recover hard from all the training that you're doing. So, all that being said, if you love to lift heavy and roll hard and you want to develop elite grappling athleticism, it all starts with building out that base of fitness, building out that base of strength and general physical preparedness, really making sure that you're dialing in your nutrition with just some basic principles like eat what has a mom or comes from the ground, consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and then really make sure that you're not just training hard, but recovering hard by optimizing the recovery trifecta with your sleep, your nutrition, and your overall training schedule. Thank you guys so much for listening to the very first episode of the Settlage Strength podcast. If there are other topics or other things that you guys want me to cover, please do drop them in the comments below on YouTube. I'm still figuring out this podcast stuff out, so I don't know when the next podcast is going to drop, but I'll see you guys then. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch y'all later. Peace.